When Alex McLeish took over the reins from Dick Advocaat as manager of Rangers in 2001, he was tasked with continuing the success of his predecessor with the promise of a fraction of the funds that had been lavished on the Dutchman, and he instantly delivered, guiding the team to a cup double in his first half-season as manager. The following campaign, he went one better. Rangers infamously secured the SPL title on the final day by way of goal difference.
You know, we knew they'd lie down and they have done.
A week later, they edged past Dundee to add the Scottish Cup to the League Cup and complete the treble, the last one the club has won. The worsening financial situation saw McLeish lose a whole host of influential first-team players and be given less than $1 million to spend on transfers to replace them, as he relied mainly on free signings. The campaign was a disaster, as Celtic reclaimed the league title by a whopping 17 points, and they were dumped out of both cups to end the season trophyless. Still operating on a tight budget, McLeish struck gold in the form of Bosman deals for defender Jean-Alain Boumsong and striker Dado Perso, who helped them put together some great form in the first half of the season. Boumsong was sold to Newcastle for £8 million in January, and so winter transfer fans were made available, and the gaffer brought back Barry Ferguson and signed Belgian Thomas Buffel, who helped them to win the League Cup in March. For the second time in McLeish's spell in charge, the title race with Celtic went down to the final day, with the Parkhead club 2 points ahead. Rangers needed a win.
Championship beckoning for Celtic. Petrov coming to the edge of the area. Turned in by Sutton. Celtic have the lead. Inside, here comes that turnover, drives it across, and Persaud from there at the near post, and Novo is absolutely delighted with himself. Rangers have taken the lead at Easter Road.
Long one up there, Varga, falling, shot, he's fallen, he's scored! He scored! McDonald scored for Motherwell! Scott McDonald has scored! The title will be heading to Easter Road to Rangers! The helicopter is changing direction!
Could be a second. Here's McDonald again!
And it's all over! And Ali McLeish is swung by his backroom staff!
After delivering the 6th and 7th trophies of his tenure, hopes were high that he could add more silverware to the cabinet. A terrible start to the season poured water on the bonfire, with October and November being particularly disastrous as they failed to register a league win in 6 games and were knocked out of the League Cup by Celtic. This form saw them virtually out of the title race before Christmas, but McLeish was given a stay of execution as Rangers were performing better in Europe, and they became the first Scottish team to progress out of a Champions League group stage and make the last 16. They were knocked out of the competition on away goals by Villarreal. After being dumped out of the Scottish Cup by Hibs and losing to Aberdeen in the league 4 days later, David Murray announced that Alex McLeish would leave his post as manager at the conclusion of the season, which they eventually finished 3rd, behind Hearts. It was the second trophyless campaign of the McLeish era, and Rangers were a club in transition and in need of a rebuild. They had to get the next managerial appointment right. Paul Le Guen was a rising star of European football. Taking over a league-winning Lyon team from Jacques Santini in 2002, he was under pressure to replicate that success. But Le Guen delivered, winning the championnat in each of the 3 seasons he spent there. He received widespread praise for his possession-based, defensively solid style of play, as well as his ability to make inspired tactical adaptations based on the opposition. He played to the strength of his players and developed, nurtured, and got the best out of the likes of Juninho, Michael Essien, and Florent Malouda. In training, he was famous for the emphasis placed on physical conditioning and stamina, as well as meticulously planned technical and tactical drills. The one question mark over his time there was his inability to establish Lyon as a force in the Champions League. He took them to the quarterfinals twice, but both the fans and the board undoubtedly had ambitions beyond that. Le Guen left Lyon in 2005 and took a break from management, working with Canal Plus in France as a pundit and analyst, where he again enjoyed much success and was well respected by his colleagues and the viewers. He was still very much a man in demand and was approached by major European clubs like Lazio, Auxerre, Fenerbahce, Benfica and Olympiacos. He rejected them all, and in March 2006, David Murray announced that Le Guen would take over from McLeish at the end of the season. This appointment was met with acclaim and commendation from the press, and it was considered a major coup that they had been able to lure such a talented, successful and in-demand coach. At his unveiling in June, Le Guen made it clear what the players could expect in terms of training.
We will work hard. It's normal to be disciplined and to work hard.
We've learned a lot. We
we work hard.
And he immediately came good on his promise. Paul Le Guen himself was a keen long-distance runner and had completed the super tough Marathon des Sables before arriving in Glasgow, something which obviously influenced the work the players did in pre-season.
It was tough, it was different, definitely different. I mean,
the full complex at Murray Park, he started putting crazy times on it where you needed to do a full lap within this. A few of the boys were struggling. Big Dado hated it, the Frenchies didn't like it.
Pre-season was totally different to what I've ever experienced. His layout of what he was wanting to do in pre-season, all the long runs, it wasn't enjoyable, but do you know what? You got to go and do it.
At Le Guen's first presser, David Murray was keen to temper expectations of what could be expected in terms of player recruitment, as the press had been reporting that Le Guen had 10 to 20 million to spend and were linking him with some audacious transfer moves for players like Kim Kallstrom, Steve Mandanda, Sidney Govou, and even a 21-year-old Bastian Schweinsteiger.
It was immediate. Nobody ever, Rangers ever said 10 or 20 million pounds. We can't spend money we don't have. One or two of you will find that there's not a pot of gold in Scottish football.
You have to wonder if Le Guen had really been lured to Rangers with the promise of a shoestring budget, or whether David Murray somewhat stitched him up there. Regardless, the financial constraints necessitated that Le Guen recruit free players, and he did, a lot of them. Chelsea teenager Dean Furman, Rennes youngsters William Stangier and Antoine Ponroy, and Senegalese World Cup midfielder Maktar Ndiaye were all brought in for nothing. Combined, their appearances for Rangers totaled just 5. There was a bit more of a buzz over the Bosman signing of midfielder Libor Sionko, a 2-time Austrian Bundesliga winner with Grazer AK and Austria Vienna, and 3-time Czech First League champion with Sparta Prague. Although his time at Rangers was disrupted by injury, he looked a decent player, and it would be harsh to call him a total flop. Undoubtedly, the biggest coup of the gratis grabs was seen to be French goalkeeper Lionel Letizia, who had been PSG's first-choice goalkeeper for 6 seasons, making 196 appearances for them before joining the Gers. He was a direct replacement for the departing Ronald Waterreus. Le Guen also dipped into the loan market, raiding Manchester United for a couple of highly rated youngsters. 19-year-old winger Lee Martin was seen as an exciting prospect, having impressed for United at youth level and caught the eye on their pre-season tour. He failed to make an impact at Rangers, looking less than impressed with the physical nature of the game in Scotland, and returned to Old Trafford in December after just 8 appearances. Aggressive 21-year-old right-back Phil Bardsley was also clinched on a short-term deal from Old Trafford. More on him later. Le Guen did have a bit of money to spend and splashed out nearly £4 million on 4 signings. 22-year-old Swedish centre-back Carl Svensson was brought in for 600k from IFK Göteborg. Quick he may have been, but that's about the only positive he had going for him, as he was pish. 6'2" but awful in the air and not at all compatible with the game in Scotland, as he had no fight whatsoever. He goes down as one of the worst defenders to play for Rangers in recent times. There was a lot of buzz around this next signing, and it was someone that Le Guen knew well from his Lyon days. Super consistent midfielder Jeremy Clement was brought in for £1.1 million and looked to be a good signing, putting in 22 solid appearances before being sold to PSG in January. And they doled out the most, £1.85 million for Slovakian centre forward Filip Sibo from Austria Vienna, a player whose name rang out around playgrounds and pitches up and down Scotland for all the wrong reasons, as you are most likely to have it shouted at you after scuffing a shot or ballooning a sitter over the bar. He announced himself for Rangers with a debut goal against Hibs, but it quickly became apparent that he really wasn't it. A hard worker if nothing else, he became a fan favourite for all the wrong reasons and was truly minced in front of goal. The only out-and-out success, and the only one of Paul Le Guen's 13 signings who lasted more than 1 season, was Bosnian defender Sasa Papac. Signed as a centre-back and looking a bit shaky at the start of his Ibrox career, he was converted into a left-back and went on to make over 200 appearances for Rangers. Disastrous though his purchases were, some of the biggest personnel mistakes Le Guen made were regarding who he let go. The Frenchman again showed just how little he understood of the Scottish game by releasing defenders Sotirios Kyrgiakos and Marvin Andrews. Although both of them were capable of mistakes, they were both generally solid players, accustomed to the Scottish game and would fight tooth and nail and give 100% for the team. Similar could be said of a homegrown squad player Bob Malcolm, another hard-working defender who could be trusted to play for the badge, had his contract ripped up after Le Guen deemed him surplus to requirements. Pacey Danish winger and legendary scorer of big goals Peter Lovengrants rejected the offer of an extension from Rangers in May and instead signed a pre-contract agreement with Schalke before Le Guen officially arrived. Not sure how much the Frenchman had to do with this one, but being without the considerable talents of Lovengrants was undoubtedly a huge miss. The signs that Le Guen's French Revolution was destined for failure were evident long before a competitive ball was even kicked. Fernando Rickson was sent home in disgrace from a pre-season tour of Africa after an alcohol-fueled incident on the flight over there, and rumours were flying about what actually went on. Le Guen refused to speak about Rickson at all to the press the next day. That the new gaffer didn't see that the fans deserved some news about a former captain was telling and troubling. Strict disciplinarian Le Guen wasn't a man for second chances, and he soon shipped the Dutch defender off to Zenit St Petersburg for £1 million. A tough taskmaster with very set ideas of how things should be done, Paul Le Guen tried to radically change the way training was conducted at Rangers. Whereas the players were used to coming in for training at 10ish, the first training session of the day was held from 8 till 11 in the mornings. The players were then told that they could go home and come back for the afternoon training session, which took place at 4. This kind of training is quite modern, and the break is meant to be an opportunity for the players to sleep and recuperate. However, such facilities were not available in Murray Park at the time. It was a hassle for the players to drive home only to come back again, so they ended up kicking their heels, getting bored and frustrated. Paul Le Guen and his assistant Yves Calou showed themselves to be poor man managers, unwilling to budge from their vision and change anything, and according to former players, unapproachable and unavailable to listen to problems.
But it wasn't just him, it was his full staff. It was named it in his staff that you could go and speak to.
Paul Le Guen was disgusted with the diet and drinking culture of his players and tried to ban many things. Monster Munch, ketchup and alcohol were all outlawed. Crisp and fizzy drinks were even removed from the vending machines. But the silliest and most negatively impactful thing that he tried to do away with was tackling. Tough and borderline illegal tackling has always been a main tactic of the opposition to break down the attacks of teams like Rangers and Celtic. Le Guen once more showed his ignorance of the highly physical nature of the SPL by forbidding his players to tackle each other in training. Phil Bardsley put in a robust but standard tackle on Thomas Buffel in practice and got sent packing by the hard-nosed and stubborn manager. This lunatic policy meant that there was a softness about Rangers the whole time that they were under Le Guen, and their defence was regularly bullied by opposition strikers. Rangers kicked off their SPL campaign with a visit to Motherwell at Fir Park. The huge influence of Le Guen was seen in the team sheet, as only 2 players of the starting 11, Pershaw and Buffel, had started the previous season's opener against Livingston. The Frenchman really fancied the technical youngster Charlie Adam, and the fact he gave him regular starts was one of the only positives of his reign. Rangers looked very good going forward and created boatloads of chances, but were rather profligate and made things much harder for themselves than it had to be, eventually securing a 2-1 victory to launch the Le Guen era in winning fashion. The following league match against a troubled Dundee United turned out to be a fascinating microcosm of Rangers' problems that season. They controlled possession, were playing good-looking football and had countless clear-cut chances to score, but were wildly wasteful, and United had to do some miracle defending to keep the scores level. At the other end of the pitch, a simple ball into the box caused chaos, and Noel Hunt found Svensson far too easy to deal with before lashing home. In the second half, United doubled their lead from a corner, with Christian Kalvnes left criminally free to power home a header. Rangers would repeatedly fail to deal with set pieces and long balls under Le Guen. Only a Chris Burke wonder strike and a freak own goal spared the Bears' blushes. Their patchy form continued, and damaging draws against Dunfermline and Kilmarnock meant they had just 12 points from a possible 18 after 6 games. They were still unbeaten though, and only 1 point behind Celtic, who had lost to Hearts on match day 2. That was all set to change. Celtic went on a 9-game winning run in the SPL, and Rangers, well, they stumbled from one domestic disaster to the next. Back-to-back away defeats to Hibs and Celtic saw Le Guen bemoan his team's lack of fight and experience as they slipped 7 points behind the boys.
I think Celtic Boston today, as I say, right down the middle of the team.
We have work to do, it's clear. I am aware that we lack of experience.
A collector's item against Aberdeen, a Philip Sebo goal only temporarily lifted the spirits. Lionel Latizi, who had missed the previous 5 matches due to injury, was reinstalled between the sticks in the place of the in-form McGregor for the home match against Cally Thistle. He had an awful game and spilled Craig Dargo's shot into the path of Graham Bain, who bundled home the winner after the Rangers attack had once again failed to break down an organised defence. Latizi was dropped and never seen again after a 1-1 draw with Motherwell. In his 8 appearances for Rangers, he conceded 10 goals and kept just 1 clean sheet, although a comedy defence in front of him should take some share of the blame. A dreadful defeat to rock-bottom Dundee United on match week 13 saw them 15 points adrift of Celtic.
Monday night. Quickly taken for Nacho Novo. Dundee United caught cold. It in, and he's posed a problem, and Nacho Novo has blasted it wide. Now Nacho Novo as Rangers threaten. Been a lively start to the second half, and Charlie Adam has Robson. Kenneth! It's in! Gary Kenneth! Conway's free kick, and Lemaire has scored!
We had chances. We had the ball during the whole first half, and We did very good beginning, and it's unbelievable to lose such a game, really.
Paul Le Guen, I think, exaggerated Rangers' dominance yesterday. Rangers never had United under the cosh, but Rangers are a team in confusion. I think Paul Le Guen is confused. I think the team are confused. Their system is confused.
Just 3 days later, and Le Guen's week went from bad to abysmal as he wrote himself into the history books for all the wrong reasons, becoming the first Rangers manager to be eliminated from the League Cup by a lower division side with a shocking 2-0 loss at home to St Johnstone. This sparked protests from angry Rangers fans outside Ibrox. David Murray moved to quell the unrest by calling an emergency press conference.
There is no doubt that domestically our performances are poor, very disappointing. 18 out of 24 journalists tipped Rangers to win the league, and it was widely acknowledged what a great signing Paul Le Guen is the manager. I have no reason to change my mind whatsoever.
Bad result domestically, and I know that the expectation is far higher, and I fully understand that. I expect more from the player, a better team bonding. It's clear. The new players can settle here. They have the qualities.
Paul is here for the long term, and we back him as the manager.
Now, I'm sure his decision to sit next to Le Guen and hold his hand was well intentioned, but it only served to make the under-fire Frenchman look weak. Frustratingly, Rangers were producing much better results in Europe and finished top of their UEFA Cup group, dropping only 2 points. The stark contrast in fortunes led to some pointed and thinly veiled comments from skipper Barry Ferguson in a post-match interview.
I don't know why we perform like that in Europe and struggle in the league. It's a problem we'll need to solve, but
Hopes that they were turning a corner domestically were dashed after a 3-match winning run was halted by a 1-0 away loss to Falkirk. Throughout all of these unacceptable defeats and draws, Le Guen's message to his players in the dressing room was that it was okay, everything would be fine if they just stuck together. And the whole time, Barry Ferguson, who had been one of Rangers' only shining lights that season, bit his tongue and kept quiet. Well, after the Light Blues followed another loss to Inverness Caledonian Thistle up with a home draw to St Mirren, he could hold it in no longer.
Going to places like Inverness, going to places like Dunfermline and drawing is no an issue. To come in and be praised for doing it, I'm sorry, I mean
I was guilty of letting it build up inside me when he was coming in and telling the team it's okay, we must stick together. And we played Inverness Cali, 2-1 they beat us up there, and he came in and he said the same thing, and I just let rip. No, this is Rangers. This isn't acceptable. We're Rangers here, and we're dropping points against teams that we should be beating.
To my mind, this is the exact type of fight and passion that you would want to see from your captain in a crisis. Yet Le Guen clearly took it as an attempt to undermine his authority, and in one of the biggest overreactions in history, he called Ferguson into his office and told him he would never play for Rangers again. His bizarre decision-making continued when he decided to give the armband to Gavin Rae for the match against Motherwell, a player who had not even started a league game all season. A Kris Boyd penalty secured a nervy win for Rangers, but the damage had already been done. Le Guen had taken a club in crisis and plunged them into utter chaos. Ferguson is a club legend, and naturally his teammates and the fans sided with him.
Absolutely disgusted at the way that Rangers have treated Barry Ferguson. He showed the heart in the fight that we expect for a Rangers captain.
Paul Le Guen, I mean, there's something that's the club's turning into a joke. Hearts were a joke at one time, but it looks like Rangers are a joke now.
Le Guen is nothing at all in our eyes now. The man is ruining Glasgow Rangers.
Looking back on it, I think it's clear to see what Le Guen wanted to achieve by sacking Ferguson, and on the 4th of January 2007 he got his wish, as after just 7 months and 31 games in charge, David Murray announced that Le Guen was to leave Rangers by mutual consent. This made him the club's shortest serving manager ever at the time. The club were 17 points behind Celtic and sitting 3rd. After several days of wrangling with the SFA, Rangers were eventually able to prize club legend Walter Smith away from his post as manager of Scotland's national team for his second spell in charge at Ibrox. Smith immediately sought to correct the central defensive deficiencies and signed David Weir and Hugo Egiog. So how did a manager that Juninho Pernambucano once hailed as the best coach in the world fail so spectacularly? The list of reasons is long. His tactics were unsuitable for the SPL, and teams found it too easy to defend against them and break up their flow. A 1-1 draw against Celtic gave a glimpse into how attractive his style of play could be when it was working, but they missed a lot of chances to win, which was also a theme of Le Guen's time there. His team selections at time bordered on the bizarre. Playing midfielder Brahim Hamdani in central defence for away matches is just one example of this. You could say that some of the players were unprofessional and resistant to change, but as manager, it was his job to sell them on his ideas and make them buy into what he was trying to do, not alienate them by trying to alter too many things too quickly and treat them like children by not explaining his reasons for doing things. His training lacked the necessary intensity required to prepare them for domestic matches. Ferguson should have been his greatest ally, yet the relationship between the two soured very quickly. You may say he wasn't backed enough by the board, but he was given a decent chunk of change to spend, and he brought in a lot of players, but they were more or less all awful and not good enough for Rangers. Most criminally were the central defenders who were unable to deal with crosses. At Lyon and in Ligue 1, he could lose 4 or 5 games a season and still win the league. That simply wasn't the case at Rangers, and Le Guen did not seem to get that at all. But the men who played under him are clear as to the main reason why he could not succeed.
He underestimated the size of the club. For people that lived and breathed Rangers, it was disappointing.
I just think you get a shock at how big Rangers was. But I just think he came and he got a shock to his system, how big Rangers was and how big a job it was that he had to do, and the expectations of the crowd is 24/7. No matter if you're going out to buy a pint of milk, you're going out with the missus for something to eat, everybody knows who you are. And I think he was like, wow, what is this?